once in your lifetime. And when you think about it, think about what the world was like before we had airplanes and trains. You know, people didn't, it was a hardship for them to go places, so people would go in caravans or on their donkey or walking and go from wherever they were living to Mecca and Saudi Arabia. And so that was a long trip. So God made it easy on us. If you can go during your lifetime, you should go once. That's the minimum. So if you can physically do it and you can afford it and you're not going to put your family in a hardship, you should go. And there are people who go multiple times, so that's allowed. It just depends. For Muslims coming from the United States, there's no quota on the numbers, so that's good for us. Certain countries do have quotas because people just keep going, and so they're trying to get people to go who've never gone before, so they get visas in order to go. So Mecca is in Saudi Arabia, and there's also another city, Medina, and a lot of people will go to that town as well and do what's called Umrah. So they will go to both places because the Prophet lived in Medina at one point, and he's buried there. So people will go there to visit that mosque as well. So those are the areas. And during the Hajj or pilgrimage, they do some rituals that are related to the life of Abraham. And it's a reminder again. So remember that Ramadan was a reminder for us on how to control our desires. And Hajj is like to restart your battery, like to remind you, wow, this is Islam, this is our brotherhood. Because when you go to the pilgrimage, I don't know if you've seen pictures before, but people, especially men, have to wear a certain outfit, and it's a seamless cloth, and they don't even wear undergarments under it. So it's one big cloth that you wear, and everybody looks exactly the same. So all the men are dressed in the same outfit, and they're all going to be as one. Because some people, right, are lawyers or doctors or dentists, and other people are poor. So when you're all wearing the same thing, everybody looks exactly the same, and they have the same desire to worship God, and that's why they're there. So if you complete the Hajj and you do all of the activities there, it's as if your sins are forgiven completely. So everything that came before that time is erased. So anything you may have done in the past that was not forgiven becomes forgiven. Right, so many people go every year, so maybe 4 million. Here we have a picture that gives you kind of an example. The interesting thing is, so this is the main building here, and these people are on the roof praying, and you can see there are different floors. So it's a big building, but then look outside. You still got all these people praying outside the mosque on the ground. So that's how many people are there, all the way around. They're praying because it's so important to them, and so many people come. So the amazing thing to me is that you could have, say, 4 million people in one place at one time, and to keep that order. You know, and that's the amazing thing about the prayer. So if they're lined up like this, they're all going to be praying, and they're all going to be doing the same act, right? And remember that I said that every Muslim is praying in Arabic, and they're praying the same movement. So all of them know, no matter what country they came from, how to perform the prayer, and how to stand in the line and pray. So that's an amazing thing, to keep all those people doing the same thing at one time. Okay, any questions about Hajj or pilgrimage? Yes?
What is the Abrahamic connection to Mecca and the Hajj?
Well, Abraham lived at that time in that area, and so he had been there with his family prior to Islam, and he there's a stone in the Kaaba, or that, can you go back to the picture? In this black box here, that's called the Kaaba, or the cube, and in there on one corner is a stone, and it's a meteorite, and so that stone, we believe, was there at the time of Abraham. So he knew that same holy place at that time. Obviously, there wasn't the same mosque or the same box around it or anything, but that place was holy, and at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, that place was still holy to the polytheists who were living at that time. So they had their statues in that place that they were worshiping idols.
So Abraham did not establish the city of Mecca?
It was not really a city, it was just a place at
So
that time.
That's my question, and you know, this really has nothing to do with faith or belief or anything like that. I'm not questioning that.
Yeah.
I'm asking what is an archaeological question
Oh,
here.
okay.
Archaeological data says that the earliest data that we have on the existence of Mecca is mid-8th century. And since by then, Muhammad had passed away, I think it was 720. You know, all of the records that, at least the histories that I've read, say that he was born in Mecca. He spent time in Mecca. He went to Medina.
The prophet or Abraham?
The prophet.
Oh,
yes.
okay, okay, yes.
But if there's no archaeological data that supports that Mecca even was in existence at this time, is there concern that perhaps Muhammad was not in Mecca, but someplace else like Petra, for example, that where the archaeological data is there, is present?
For an earlier time, you mean?
Right, exactly.
That I don't know. I haven't read any archaeological data about that. All I know is that we believe that that place was holy to him, and because if you see this, it's hard to see in this picture, but there's a place here, and at the end there's a long strip there. There's two buildings on each end. We believe that Abraham's wife, Hajar, went back and forth. Those were small hills at the time. She was going back and forth because she was thirsty and she couldn't find anything to drink. She was in the desert and she was alone. So those are the two places that she went back and forth looking. And so now they've created the building over it, and the pilgrims will go there and do the same walk that she did.
The existence of Mecca nowadays is undeniable.
Mhm.
What's kind of worrisome, and I know Muslims, I think, are very bothered by this, that in the 70s, the 1970s, there was extensive bulldozing of historical sites by the Saudis, erasing what little archaeological data existed to even establish Mecca's existence in the 8th or the 9th or the 10th century. So my question again is it possible, and again, it doesn't deny the faith or anything, is it possible that that Muhammad was not born in Mecca because he wasn't there, but someplace like Petra, for instance?
Well, that's an interesting question I've never thought about. I don't know if everybody could hear her.
I teach anthropology. Perhaps I can say a few words about that. Many religions, including the three main monotheistic faiths, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, have places of worship that don't necessarily have a traceable record in the archaeological evidence. Rather, they have been recognized through the centuries by word of mouth without certainty that the place is in fact that it's claimed to be. This is common in Christianity when it comes to the place where Jesus was crucified, or the house of Peter, or the tomb where Jesus was interred. And the same thing goes in Judaism as well. Therefore, to try to point to archaeological record for locations that have to do with the faith is rather, I think, a misplaced attempt to try to find evidence for something that is really rooted in tradition.
Well, I understand that, but I think there's a significant difference between was the exact location of the tomb, the crucifixion site, and all of that. Do we know exactly where that was located, as opposed to do we know that Jerusalem clearly existed at that time and for many, many centuries before, versus the existence of literally an entire area? And I guess my concern is that the textbooks that are coming out now consistently teach this particular version, but
don't think, I mean, today, obviously, and you mentioned that the Saudis have been really busy bulldozing and moving things around, and it's not because of hiding things, but they don't want Muslims to worship things, because there are Muslims who get really attached. Yeah, they get really attached to a place, and they think that's the place, and so they will swarm to it, and they'll want to do devotion there, and the Saudis don't want them to do that. So that's their reasoning for like obliterating some historical locations. But I never thought about the archaeological part of it. And one thing that we do know, that in the story about Hajar and her movement, that at one point she trips or kicks this rock and then water gushes up, and that's the well of Zamzam, which is located right here under the mosque. So that thing is there, and the story comes from that time, so we believe these things are connected because of the story that goes back to that history, and it's still there. So I don't know if that helps your question, but I don't think I can answer, archaeologically speaking, how we know these things. So we take it on faith that that's, our tradition, and that's the way we follow it.
Well, like I said, it's a scientific question as opposed to a faith.
Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, I did talk a little bit about Hispanics coming to Islam, and there's an interesting history there because Spain was controlled by Muslims for 800 years. And so there is a history there, and of course if you go today, you can see like in Granada and other places, buildings that were from that time period. And so you have a real connection to that. So there's interesting info about that, and of course if you know your history, you can talk about the Inquisition, where Jews and Muslims were then persecuted and run out of Spain. So there's a connection in Spanish as well with Arabic, and people still don't know that these names that they have, like Omar, Sarah, Medina, these are Arabic names, but a lot of Hispanics who are Christian, they have these names because it's a cultural thing for them, right? But these go back to Arabic, and there's a lot of words in Spanish that sound similar to Arabic words, and you can read those for yourself. But I think that's fascinating, and I would love to read a book just about that kind of history and the connection between the Spanish language and Arabic. Okay. Oh, good. Okay, so we've come to the end of the slideshow portion. If there are other questions you have, I can talk about, some of the things I see going on in society today, living as a Muslim in the U.S., especially like Islamophobia and these kind of things. Depends on what's interesting, or if you have questions. Yes, sir.
I'll just keep mine brief because there's so many areas that weren't covered. My question is about Sharia law, and specifically the section of Sharia law called Hudud Sharia, which deals with punishments. Any law obviously has to have punishments for those who transgress the law. Under Sharia law, isn't it true that those who leave Islam, apostates, and especially those who criticize Islam after leaving, they are subject to the death penalty, as well as homosexuals and adulterers? Could you comment on that? And when I say people who leave the faith, I know there's disagreement among some of the scholars, some of the schools of thought, but it seems to be universal that those who leave the faith and then publicly criticize Islam should be subject to the death penalty.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this is a good topic because there's a lot of misconceptions about what is Sharia law, and we've seen in the media, people get all hot under the collar about it, and are coming out with their signs and saying, oh, we don't want Sharia law in this country, and that's not happening, obviously, but we have a code of conduct for Muslims. And the interesting thing about Sharia law that people don't know, it's not just about discipline. It's about everything. It's about how to pray. It's about how to eat. It's how to talk to your neighbors, how to treat animals. It's everything. it is the Quran and the Sunnah together. The Hadith and the Quran are all those things together are Sharia law. So it includes everything. So you can't just pick one thing and say, oh, that's what it is and it's bad, it's negative. It's bigger than that. So it's how you behave. It's how you have morals and behave with other people. It's how you pray and do the fundamentals of the faith, as well as, you know, how to raise your children and how to prepare food, go to the bathroom, everything. There are guidances for all of those things. The interesting part is that it would be better if you didn't videotape, because I don't know if you're going to cut and paste this later and turn it into...
No, but I have the right to videotape. This is a public event at a public institution.
Not at a campus, sir.
I would ask to bring the policeman back in. He just affirmed it to me. I told him I was videotaping, and he says I have every right to do it.
That is correct.
I am not disrupting any. Please continue. I am not disrupting you.
All right, well, I'm going to depend on your good intention that it will...
I will
stay
not edit anything.
not edited. Okay, so when we think about all of those rules in one place, these were set up to have an Islamic society. So at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, these were the rules that they lived by, and this is how they learned to be Muslims, and how they behaved with one another, right? You're welcome, thank you. At that time, of course, they were new to Islam as well. Basically, all the beginning people in Islam, they were all converts. So I kind of feel like an affinity with those people, because I came new into Islam and those people were all new into Islam. So while they were living there, they had a society, and after the Prophet, peace be upon him, there were several rulers over time, and down to maybe you could consider the Ottoman Empire part of the Islamic State. But when we look at governments today, and any of the ones that you would consider to be Muslim, none of them are Islamic states, and none of them are living the real Islam. There's a lot of politics, a lot of culture going on, sorry about that makes it completely separate from an Islamic state. So that means if we don't have any true Islamic state today, that means that none of those punishments can be meted out, because the rulers are not capable within an Islamic state to give out those punishments. So that means anyone who left Islam, there is no punishment for that today, because there is no Islamic state. So all the other things you've heard about, like cutting off the hand for stealing, those things would have been meted out in a true Islamic state, for which there is not today. So do we have examples where these things are happening today? Yes, we do. But the majority of Muslims do not believe that any of these countries and governments are quote-unquote Muslim. Does that help?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I just ask
Yes.
one question on that? Oh,
It's related?
yeah. You said because we don't have an Islamic state today, you mean like a caliphate versus, ISIS in Iraq and that area?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to.
They're not recognized
Right.
by majority of Muslims as an
Sorry about
Islamic
that.
state.
May I ask this little question? Small question, please. About Saudi Arabia, they having this attitude for killing people and cutting their head and cutting their hand for stealing and for converting to be cut head on Jeddah or in Riyadh or whatever in Saudi Arabia? Is it considered an Islamic country or what?
Well, I just mentioned that I didn't believe that there were any true Islamic state right now, because they're doing some
What
things
about
that
Saudi
are
Arabia that
cultural.
have the Mecca in it?
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking our guests for coming. So we've come to the end of the prepared presentation, and at this point, the information session has concluded, and the classes, professors, do you have class conduct still to?
No.
to
If anyone in my class didn't sign the attendance, I have it, but otherwise.
So in professor